Welcome to the podcast today. We have Eric from Meadowlark Games, and we're going to be talking about all things tabletop RPGs, creating content,
Mhm.
creating community, and just having some good conversation about great ideas. So, Eric, could you go ahead and introduce yourself just a little bit before we get started?
Yes, so I am Eric of MeadowlarkGames.com, and there is another person, Kevin, and we created Meadowlark Games together a couple of years ago on a random project that brought us together. We'd been friends for a long time, but a random project that fell in my lap brought us together, and we kind of hastily formed Meadowlark Games to really jump on something that was exciting. I am an artisan bladesmith in my daytime. I am a husband and a father. Do as much of that as I do anything else. And also, yeah, Meadowlark Games, playing, getting people to the table, rolling dice, having fun, all that kind
Great.
of stuff, man.
All right. So I like to start the episodes with the most important question. How did you get into the game? Tell me all about the first time you played, and how did you know when you were going to make it a significant part of your free time and life?
That is the big question. So I grew up playing lots and lots of board games with my older brother. He has been my best friend my entire life. He's 2 years older than I am, and he is a board game guy. He was a board game kid. He could open up a box and read the instructions and be like, okay, buddy, here's how this works. And me with ADD was like, that's great because I don't want to read those instructions. I want you to just explain to me how this board game works.
Hmm.
And so we played Hero Quest and Battle Masters and Hero Quest and Battle Masters and grew up playing tons and tons of fantasy board games. And as we got older, that translated pretty easily into playing D&D. And I really can't remember the first time exactly that I sat at a table to play because might have been it must have been during college that I got to play once with some friends, and
Hmm.
I didn't really get to come back to it, because I just had other things going on, that soaked up my time at that time. But then some years later, I started listening to more podcasts about it because it was something that I just really wanted to get back into or
Hmm.
get into. Really, again, I probably only sat at the table once,
Hmm.
or twice to play it, and so again, must have been close to 10 years ago or something like that. I finally picked up a copy of the DMG and the player's handbook, and I told my family I want to try this. I want to sit down and I want to try this. I want to try running a game. And so I did. I GM'd, I
So
DM'd.
the first time you played, you were the DM.
Other than that one time when I played in college, yeah,
Yeah.
the first time I really, as an adult, that I really sat down and played D&D, I was the DM for my family. And then pretty quickly found other friends who also played D&D that I didn't know
Hmm.
played, and then it was like, oh, great, well then we can play together now, and we did. We started playing a lot. I would love to say we could play more than we do,
Hmm.
but yeah, that was, yeah, probably, well, like I said, maybe not quite 10 years ago, that I ran my first game.
So your first edition was fifth edition.
Yeah, well, again, in college, I think it was probably
It must have been.
either
It was probably fourth or third,
4.
maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're right, I was thinking like 3.5 or 4.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but I didn't own the rules. Now, I had a
Right.
neighbor that did when I was a kid, and I remember, like, reading through it, but I never got to play it. Just kind of in that whole fantasy board game space that we were in. I did get to read, some rules early when I was younger, but I never really got to play until I was in college.
Mhm.
And then, yeah, my first edition that I purchased was 5e.
What do you think was the spark? Like when you first played and you knew, okay, I'm gonna play this again. I'm gonna play it a lot. Like, was there something? Some people like, they like the numbers. They like the number crunching. They like thinking about their characters. They like thinking about the story. There's always one kind of like I like all of that, but there's like kind of one hook for me about like why I I persist in it and why I put so much time and attention into it. What do you think it was for you?
I think the initial draw for me was when I listened to some actual plays, because it was kind of the idea was percolating again.
Mm,
Well, so I always did a lot of, like, I've read fantasy books growing up, and again did lots of board games, and so I was looking for something like that to grab, and something kind of newish to engage in that bit of creativity. Also sci-fi, not just fantasy, but that was D&D was the most accessible thing that I could definitely get my hands on. I could go to Barnes and Noble, and you could
mm,
find the some of the book, the R.A. Salvatore books. I read the Dritz
yeah.
series when I was a kid.
Right.
I didn't get to play, but I read those books as a kid. And then I found some comics, and so it really was just kind of like the periphery of it that initially got me thinking, like, I really enjoy this. I just need to go and buy the rule books and play the game, because the the idea of sitting down with my friends and doing make believe again, like I did growing up with my brother, and that was extremely alluring to me. I
Mm,
really want to sit down and be a dragonborn paladin with my friends, and that just
right.
sounds really, really fun. Sounds like a great way to spend an afternoon. And but again, I had been kind of in the periphery, reading books and listening to podcasts and all that kind of stuff. And I don't know, it finally was just like, another thing was that my wife had been telling me, she's like, you've got all these. I do a lot of creative work, obviously, as an artisan, but I had all these other things. When I play with the kids, I lots of voices and storylines, and help them create their own imaginative spaces and things like that. And my wife would tell me, like, you should start writing this stuff down. You
Yeah.
should start recording this. You should start, And so I guess I also felt kind of free and encouraged to do that. And so, yeah, I guess at one point I was just like, I got to get it. I got to get it. And so I bought the starter set, like right when it came out. I think I had really, yeah.
The
Now that
Stormwreck Isle.
no, the Fandelver, the Mines of
Oh, okay.
Fandelver. Yeah.
Yeah,
So I grabbed that, and then and then we played through that, and we're like, yeah, this is really fun. I had my brother and my nephews and my wife and my kids. So we sat down and went through Fandelver, and I was like, I want to do this. So then I went out and got the DMG and the player's handbook. We just used the ones that were in the kit, and then my kids that Christmas got me Tyranny of Dragons, and like ever since
yeah.
it's
Nice.
just been,
There you go.
and then it's on to new systems, and it's on to other things. And so that was kind of, the gateway was very old and well trod
Mm.
path of fantasy games.
Are
And
you almost always the DM, or do you get a chance to play too?
I I do a lot of both. I started out being almost always the DM, but once I got a little bit more into the community and I found more friends that do it, they invite me constantly to come play at their tables. So and this group is like other creators that are already publishing stories and books and writers and things in that world. And so I'm very lucky to get to sit down sometimes and play games with
Mm.
people who create the games. And so, yeah, it's a nice mix now. It's a lot more of a mix than it
Yeah.
was maybe 5 or 6 years ago, when it was like,
It's
if we want to play, I got to run it.
right. Yeah, yeah. I found I went through multiple decades where I was the DM every single time, no matter what.
Yeah, yeah.
And I finally this year had a chance to be a player again, and I just kind of
Nice.
took a break from being a DM, and I forgot what it was like to be a player.
Yeah.
Like I'm ADHD too, and like as a player, that was hard. It was actually really hard to just sort of sit and just try and be in one character rather
Yeah.
than being the world, because when you're in
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
world you've got all these, you're thinking about everything all at the same time. That's one
Yep.
of the things I like about DMing is it really keeps me fully engaged.
Hmm.
But once you're a player, you got to learn to kind of quiet your mind and just be that one person. It's still hard for me to be a player.
There's
Not in that I'm like bored or anything. It's
Yeah,
just
yeah.
the you're it's an asymmetrical experience. You're doing
Yes.
something very different than the DM.
It
Um,
is. I find when it's my turn to be a player that that there's a few things that I'm looking for that help me really like focus in on what that character is meant to be doing so that I can stay like fully engaged and looking for
mm,
opportunities for that character to do something. And one of the things that I always try to do is look for opportunities to have relationships with people who are already at the table, right? These are
mm,
almost always my friends, but I just am
mm.
like, hey, one of the examples recently was we played DC. Have you played Dungeon Crawl Classics before, DCC?
I've seen it, but I haven't had a chance to play it. I'd have to do it
It's wild.
online because I can't
It,
find anyone here.
yeah, you know what? Maybe that's something I can work up to is running the game online for you. But it's wild.
Hmm.
If you start on level 0 DCC, you are literally like a turnip farmer, and you have between 1 and 4 hit points, and you usually start with two or
I
more characters as your characters with basically no stats. Most of them are negatives, and you might have literally just like a trowel as your weapon, and most of those characters are expected to die by the end of the adventure. And then if one survives, then you carry that one forward and try and level them up if you want to continue to play the game. But everyone starts out as like a dirt farmer. And so at the last time that we played, I had two characters, and one of them was a dwarven stonemason, and one of them was like a halfling moneylender. And so one of my friends at the table also had a dwarven stonemason. So immediately I was like, do you want to be brothers? And he's like, yeah, that sounds cool. I was like, all right, awesome. And then one of the other players, this is my son's best friend. This is also the son of my friends. He had a character who owed someone a lot of money and was also like an alcoholic. And I was like, okay, listen, you owe me that money. And he was like, all right, cool. Right. So immediately my two characters have that's it. That's their motivation. There's nothing else on the sheet about their flaws, about their motivations, about their whatever. If it's not there, then I'm going to make it right now at the table and figure out what is going to drive this dwarven stonemason to do one thing or another, and what's going to drive this halfling moneylender to do one thing or another. And so throughout that adventure, the dwarven stonemason was predominantly worried about his own brother. And so he would be probably more brave than he normally would. He had 1 hit point. One.
Mm,
He was going to die. The first time he got hit
right.
by anything, he was going to
Like
die.
one hit and you're out.
Oh, out, dude, done, right? And there's no mechanism at that time for revival. That's it. He's dead. But he did
Right.
not care. That's his brother. So those two characters, all I think his character had like 2 hit points. So the whole time they were two of the most like heroic people in that adventure, even though they were going to die the first time that got hit, because they had each other. They had a
Right.
relationship with each other. And so if that one would get in any kind of a bind, the other would come rushing in headstrong, not even thinking about it. And they finally went out in a blaze of glory fighting the last monster. The one died and dropped the magic weapon, and the other picked up and critted, and then they died the next round, and someone else. And so it was really cool. Just boom, relationship. Now I know
Yeah.
what to do. I know what to do. I know that I need to immediately address whatever danger my friend is in, right? And then
Mm,
the money lender was the other way around. He wasn't all that concerned about the other guy's like safety, other than he owed him money. And so he was a lot more standoffish, and he was like a little bit less likely to dive into scenarios. But by the end, he also had that opportunity to kind of find his ability to be a hero. And so he helped save like 3 or 4 other people while the ship was sinking, and there was fire, and he didn't really do a lot of fighting, but he did do his own heroic things because he'd built relationships with those other characters as well. So that's kind of my thing when I sit down at the table, is like, again, what are the motivations, what are the flaws of my character, and who can I have a relationship with like right now at the table that I'm like, I want to be your friend right now. And in fact,
mm,
I like to do that as session 0 if possible, to say, hey, does anybody want to already have a relationship with my character, whatever that relationship is, right? Like a friendship, or I'm your charge, or I'm, whatever that is. But because then right off the bat, we've got something. that we can kind of grasp onto,
Mm.
and it helps, kind of immerse myself in that character and in that world. Even if it's just a one shot, I'm looking for that anyway. Some way that I can
Yeah.
convey that so that it's
Yeah,
not.
that's a great point. Is like you'll think, oh well, it's just a one shot. I don't need to be, but actually, just that little bit of, oh yeah, we're siblings, or we're like, yeah, just
Yeah.
whatever it is. That just always adds that. It always just kicks everything up just a little bit.
It
Um,
does. It gives it some stakes, you know.
yeah.
That's what I'm looking for.
Mm,
I because it's a one shot. I'm not one of those people that feels like, oh, it's a one shot. I'll just kill myself at the end. I don't really care. I'm thinking like these people live in this world. They exist in this world, and they have something to tell me. They have something to say about this world, and
mm,
I need I need to play them like they exist in this world. And
mm,
I mean, it's no different in like a sci-fi setting, right? We played CBR plus PNK. Same thing. It was a
mm,
one shot, but we had two characters that were in one in the real world and one in a virtual world. And my virtual world character, her like predominant concern was that kids who had been gene enhanced were not like abused and taken advantage of. And then there
mm,
was another person who had kind of a similar thing about defending children. And so I was like, okay, we got the same goal. We're friends. And now that informs the way that we're going to interact with the people in this world. If there are children present, this is what my character is less likely to try and do, to try and protect them, try and get them
mm,
out of there. And his character is going, yeah, yeah, me too. But he's got a whole different tool belt for how he's going to do that. Right. And then back in the real world, again, my character had a sister, and someone else at the table was already canonically my character's sister. So she's thinking, okay, how do I protect my sister now? I have these tools that I would use to protect this person. And then another player had saved my life in the past. So it's like, okay, then I'm gonna, have some concern about that person's life. No matter the setting, no matter the system, I think the best thing you
mm.
can do is try and build relationships right off the bat that just say, hey, here's why we care about each other, and here's why our lives matter in this
Mm,
world. They
mm.
matter. They would matter to those people.
Yeah. I've noticed that a lot of new players, they get really, which is great. They get really into the backstory of their characters, but they never stop and say, what's my relationship with the other people at the table? So it
Yeah,
depends on the campaign. One of my solutions is just like I have to put them in danger together.
yeah.
They're just like I started Descent into Avernus. I don't know if you've
Oh
ever
yeah,
played that,
yeah.
where the city of Eltruel
Yep.
has
Oh,
is
true.
at
Oh
the
God.
technically at the beginning is gone.
Yep.
I changed it so you're all fleeing, you're all citizens of that city, and you just
Yeah.
flee the destruction, and
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
that forces you to sort of be friends with each other in one way or another.
Yeah.
And it completely changed the campaign, because now they have a goal, they're all trying to get back to the city. But if you don't do something like that, you do need to stop and say, like, hey, these are the ways my this player knows this person.
Yep.
Every time I have a campaign where you all start in a bar and someone gives you a job,
Yep.
it starts off from a really flat place,
It does.
unfortunately.
Yep. That's kind of one of those things where that is really worth doing in a session zero, right? Is just establishing the relationships between these characters. And I think sometimes it's worth just kind of letting our players know, like, don't come to the table with a fully flushed character.
Mm,
Come to the table with a concept of a character, and we'll figure out how to knit that character into the world in a way that makes sense so that you feel like you belong here when you roll the dice for the first time. You feel like you belong here. And while we're at it, we have a relationship to each other, right? You're at least a couple of us do, if not all of us. I think it's great if you can all have a relationship to each other. Just figure out what that dynamic is so that we've already got a fundamental linkage that brings us together, and we care, right? We care about each other, even if, again, if it's just two of you at first.
mm,
We are friends. We go back. Okay, put that in your backstory. You and that person go back someday, some distance in time, and and you have a friendship, or you were in school together, or whatever it is. But bring that to the table. Kevin and I have talked a bunch of times about having characters that are built that way, like dwarven
mm,
brothers, or one where the elder warrior who is essentially the guardian of the younger sorcerer or whatever, where it's like that person's main focus is going to be on the safety of that other character, and that will change the dynamics of the way that the party runs. And I think that
Mm,
that stuff is really engaging, and it makes it really exciting, because otherwise, you're right, it just kind of starts flat. It's like, okay, what are we doing here? Why would we know each other, and why would someone pay us to do this random thing? So if you
mm,
start tying those relationships to each other before you even roll any dice, then it's like, ah, okay, and also I think, like at Fantasy Feast, we have essentially like a prologue that kind of explains what you, well, actually, we wrote the prologue into an adventure, but even before that, there's a prologue for the prologue adventure, where it's like, this is how you know each other, and this is why you're here. And it's a very deliberate thing for you to be here.
mm.
And you are friends with each other, and you've worked with each other for a number of years. And so, like, you know, now we can move forward with that understanding that we know each other.
So one thing you had said earlier was that you had already seen some actual plays
Yeah.
before you started DMing. So this is to me, like I'm a child of the '80s. My first system was the first system.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's a bizarre alien world to me,
Yeah. Yeah.
because when we started playing, you're just in your neighborhood. There's no
Yeah.
internet. Like, it's
Yep.
just your friends. You just have the book. You have to figure out how to play.
Hmm.
You've never seen anyone else do it before. So you're
Yeah.
just guessing how it's to be played. And then you'll move to another town or you'll play somewhere else. They play it completely differently.
Yep.
That's not a thing anymore because of actual plays. But
Yeah.
one on the flip side of that, which is fine, I think there are best practices. There are
Hmm.
things like session zero. You should do a session zero. We didn't do that back then, and we should have. It wasn't even a concept.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
on the flip side of that, though, you will have a lot of people watching actual plays and say, I
Hmm.
really like Critical Role. That's how I should DM.
Yeah. That's a that's just something that you have to shake loose, that I think comes with a little bit of insecurity, that, like, you will be perfectly fine just being yourself. And
Mm,
you see that a lot in the artisan space as well, where someone is like, I just need to do what I want to do based on this other person. And really, you're only going to find your space if you find your own way. And it's okay to have best practices, and it's okay to have things that you compare yourself to, just to check and say, is there some way that I would do that a little bit differently? But, like, everyone's going to do this differently. It doesn't need to be a huge performance. Now, if you think you can make it a big performance, then go right ahead, right? Like, I am a fairly performative GM.
mm,
I do, I'm up and moving, and I'm, lots of voices and sounds, and that's my personality. Cavan is not as much so, but he's absolutely as good of a GM as I am, and
mm,
in every conceivable way. He has just as many people leaving his table happy as I do mine. And so the thing I think to focus on is that these games are about, having fun with your friends, building community, sometimes fun, meeting new people. Just keep that in focus, and don't worry too much about what the professionals are doing, because but also realize that, like, this wasn't a professional thing until a few years ago either,
right.
right? So this is just they're the first ones to hit it,
Mm,
and there's still room for all kinds of different interpretations of that role. The GM is
mm,
just one of the roles, right? It's just like everyone at your table doesn't have to speak in a specific voice, or even speak from first person as their character. There's plenty of
mm,
room for people to talk, and this is what my character does, and this is what they're thinking, and they say that. There's plenty of room for that. There's nothing wrong with that. So, I mean, there's the whole comparison is the thief of joy thing, yes, but also
mm.
it's more just like, there's no one way to do this. So just do what makes you feel comfortable and is fun for you. If
Mm,
it's not
that's
fun
right.
for you, you won't come back to the
That's
table,
it's all that
right?
matters.
Yeah, I mean that
Yeah.
why else are we doing this, right?
Right.
Like we're sitting down at a table and swinging pretend swords at each other. Like why else are we doing
Right.
this if we're not having fun? So you just need to be the kind of GM that you want to be, that your table needs, and that whatever it is that you're capable of.
Yeah, that's great. I want to change a little bit. So,
Yeah,
excuse me. Let's keep talking about DMing a little bit. And
yeah,
GMing. One of the things I noticed when I first started following you on
mhm,
the other platform
yeah.
was that both of you at Meadowlark are great at narration. You're just really good
Oh,
at
thanks.
describing scenes uh, and uh, and just like you just have a really good way of efficient use of words to describe a scene just within a few seconds to have a full player have a full picture in their head. So I was wondering if you could give some advice about how you approach the narration of things. So I mean, we were just talking about Critical Role, and
Yep.
Matt Mercer will talk for
Yeah, yeah,
like
yeah,
5 minutes describing a room,
yeah,
and like that's not my style. My style is very much,
yeah,
oh, you're in the room of you're in the room of the count,
yeah, 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 yeah.
and then I stop there. Like that's it. Like I don't
Yeah.
even really
And
like
that's okay. Again, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with allowing people to develop their own picture,
right.
right? But when I have a picture in my head, which I commonly do, I have a pretty clear picture in my head. I like to at least try and set the tone for the place that people are in so that it helps with what kind of actions someone might take, what their emotional state might be, right? So if you're gonna take a moment to describe, you break out through a tree line and you see a prairie in front of you. What are the things that you're gonna see there that are just really striking? That really would stand out, right? It's the bioforms, right? It's whether it's dinosaurs or it's
Mm,
the aurochs and the crimson axe beaks, or it's the large birds that are circling, or it's the different kinds of flowers. Just pick like a couple details that are just like really hit it, where it's like, yeah, there's all of these flowers that are about neck height, and they have this really nice bell shape that's pink, and there's like clusters of 8 of. It's just a field of those. And then there are bison that are just kind of like slowly making their way across the field back into the distance, as far as the eye can see. Just a couple quick things that, and the sun is kind of beating on your face, and it's a nice and warm day with a breeze. A couple quick things that give them a spark. That then whatever else is in their head, they're going to figure that out, right? They're going to figure that
mm,
out, and they're going to lay that out when they go to interact with that world. But for me, I usually have a pretty clear picture in my head about what they're seeing. So I try to just hit a couple things that give them maybe an emotional state, or maybe, alternatively, it's like, boom, you kick down the door and this is the horrifying thing that's in front of you.
mm,
Now they know, again, just a few details of what's in the background, what's in the midground, what's in the foreground, what's right in front of them. And then they'll start asking more questions, right? And then you can
mm,
start plugging in those details. But a few quick details, something to set the tone, and just something cool that is like, oh, I like that, yeah,
mm.
that's nice. That makes them feel like
Yeah, make
they're,
sure you're in the fantasy world, or if you're
yeah,
not playing fantasy, just something that
yeah,
has the vibe.
yes,
Like if you're playing
yeah,
cyberpunk, like someone's got some sparks coming out of their head or something
yeah,
because they've got some broken,
right,
cyberware, right?
yeah.
Yeah, add always add some flavor. How much do you prep it though?
So, oh man, that kind of depends on the adventure and on what we're doing. So, with my homebrew, our homebrew worlds, we have developed them we've developed, like, say, the world of Asleia. We've developed it pretty thoroughly, but not down to the most minute details. Again, a lot of it is we want to leave room for our players to tell us what's in these spaces because
Mm,
they are actually from there, right?
mm,
So, like, if you are from Deep Run's Reach, this massive sprawling city that's on stilts out in the Deep Run River Delta, then like if you're from there, you can tell me more about what's in Deep Run than I can. I'll just set out the couple of major places. But like if your character is from there, then yeah, who do you know here? Like you grew up
Mm,
here. Tell me about the docks. Tell me about where the fishermen go. Tell me about what kinds of things they pull out of the water, and tell me about, what do the schools look like, and like just try and get them engaged in building some of that world with me, so that I don't have to build literally all of it out. But I,
mm,
I try to have a couple things in mind. Like I try to know where I am in this world, right? Like have a deep understanding on like a geographic level of where am I at in this world, so that I can help them understand where they're at in this world. Not everything needs to be known, and some of it you just come up with on the fly, right? If
mm,
they you didn't know they were going to walk into a tavern for a drink, then it's you walk into the tavern, it's all dark gray floors with spattering and a polished bar top with a half orc woman standing behind the bar with an apron on, and it's all lit with candles, and but it's pretty chill in here. There's just a handful of people deep in their drinks off in the corner, right? You just make it up on the fly.
mm,
That's fine.
mm,
No one, that just pop, whatever pops in your head, shoot some of that out of there. But the big thing for me again is just like if I know kind of where they're at in the world, then it helps me be a little more confident with those on the fly
mm,
decisions, but also it gives them a little bit of a chance to help develop that, right? Where it's
mm.
like, hey, they just walk into Greenbrier and someone is like, have we ever been here? I'm like, I don't know, roll it. You have. Awesome. Tell me who you know. Oh, I know the guy that owns the general store. That's nice. Have you guys been friends for long?
Mm.
Yeah, we go way back. Awesome. Okay, what's their name? And then we say, all right,
Right.
cool. Let me write that down in
Yeah.
my notes.
It's
That's
like,
great.
so when you're early on in your, GMing career, you always have that moment where your players will walk into the tavern. It's like, what's his name? What's their name?
Hmm,
What's
hmm.
her name? I don't know. And so as soon as I realized,
Do
I
you
just
ask
clicked
them?
one day. I was like, ask
Yeah.
you tell me what their name is. Like I've started relying on the players to describe sort of the tactical, like it's like you said, like you've got like an overall framework for what you want the world to look like.
Yeah.
But then once you get into the room, so if I go back to the example, if you're in the room of the count, what is the
Yes.
first thing your character notices in this room?
Yeah. The
And
first
then
thing.
suddenly and it takes so much pressure off you as the GM
Yep.
to figure everything out all the time. It's like you
Yep.
can, and it's actually more fun because you get to see what they think, and if they have
Hmm.
something cool, you get to run with it, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. You say, you walk into the room of the count and there's a massive hearth, 20 feet off to the left with a big roaring fire in it. And there's, tapestries on the wall and some rugs out in the front and a couple of chairs. And so is there a desk in here? There is a desk in here. It's in the corner. Like, okay,
I
can
want
I go
to
look at it?
I
You
want to
sure
go look.
can.
I was going to say it's the first thing I was thinking is I want to see what's in the desk.
Yeah, and so then it's just like, well, if you know the motivations of
Yeah.
any individual, but that's the other thing. Like you don't have to know everybody, but just have some ideas in your head about what's going on in this adventure. And so if somebody says, "Well, are there any papers?" It's like, "Yeah, actually there's a couple of missives where they were communicating with, well, that's obviously the letters from the other person, and this is what they said about some business dealings and about this and about that." And you're like, just what is account, right? What is
Mm,
what is their role to play in this? And so like you don't have to know all the details of the count. Just know what they're up to in general, right? And it's the
mm,
same thing with the red dragon that's up the mountain. Just know that it's there. Just know that what it's generally up to in this region, and you can
mm,
figure everything else out as you go, and you can let your players help build a little bit of that stuff. And
mm,
like you said, if your character has a specific propensity for like, oh, I'm a history, I have a really high history roll. Okay, when you walk in and you see those tapestries, what are you looking at? What do you think those tapestries are? And they're like, oh, yeah,
mm,
maybe it's their family tree. Yeah, yeah, okay. So there you go. There's a tapestry woven in of this family tree, and you can go make note of it if that's what you want to do. Or there's, oh, it's the
mm,
the battle from the Dominus Ferrum War from back in the day. Yeah, that's really good. It's a cool tapestry up there on the wall. Give them something that they can just, but
Mm,
especially if it doesn't really mean anything. But they there it is. They helped. They created it. Now it's in the world. Now there it is. And
mm,
there's no reason it can't be there, right? Is like, I mean, you got to trust your players, of course.
mm.
They're not just going to say, "Hey, there's a vorpal sword hanging above the fireplace or whatever." Like, yeah, but just little mundane things. They can help
Yeah,
build that. It's a
yeah.
good thing
There's
for
one.
them to do because then
Yeah.
they're not fully relying on you for their understanding of the world. They have
Mm,
their own understanding of it, right? They have their own experiences in this world and they can help share those with you and with the rest of the players
mm,
and help kind of flesh out the world from there.
mm. I think you can. It's something that you can practice. You don't have to wait until you're actually sitting down and playing. And in fact,
Oh
if
yeah.
that's something that you think you want to get better at, my advice is always get yourself a little notepad,
Yep.
and then just try and describe one room every day or one
Yeah.
scene every day, and see if you can do it in just 3 or 4 sentences, and practice reading it out
Yeah.
loud so you see how it feels, because when you write something it might not sound very good when you actually say it. So
Yeah.
if you just sort of do that and then you just get in the habit of it, then your on the fly skills get way better.
Oh
The
yeah.
other thing is you'll build up your vocabulary. You'll learn, like, like you'll if you're a intellectually curious person, you'll start doing things like, okay, now I know what a bailey is in a castle, and now I know what crenellations are, or
Yeah.
now
What
I
they're
know what
for.
barding is on a horse.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
all this stuff that comes up, and even
Yep.
if your players don't know what that is, now you know how to describe it because you know what it is.
Yeah.
That's
Absolutely.
kind of
You
that's one of the
know.
off game, off the table kind of fun things to do,
Oh
I
yeah. Oh
think, as a
dude.
DM.
Yeah, Kevin and I are constantly doing that. I'm like, dude, how much do you actually know about bogs before I write this
Right,
scene? And I'll be like,
right.
all right, let's go. Let's go. We're gonna dive. We're
Let's
gonna do a
learn
deep dive.
about bogs.
Yeah, we're gonna learn about bogs. Yeah, just so that for one scene we make sure we get her just right. But
Right.
so yeah, the walking around with a notebook thing. Kevin and I do that a lot too, where like
Yeah.
literally we'll be taking a walk, and I've done this in a video. You take a walk somewhere and look at a space in the world and say, if this was a fantasy world, what could be there?
Mm,
Not necessarily what would be there, but what could be there? What could be right there? And what would happen if it was?
mm.
What would happen if a boulette came through the
Right.
farm that's
Yeah.
not that far from my house? Like,
Right.
what would happen, if a boulette came crashing up through the ground at, the Tyner Pond farm down the road from me with all their cattle that are great, that are grazing on the grass out there. What's going to happen if that
What's
happens?
gonna happen? Yeah.
So even just little things like that, and then it gives you that again, that little spark where you're like,
Yeah.
and kind of same thing with random tables, right? Roll on a
Mm,
random generator and then think through real quick, how would this apply to this world, right? So we
mm,
had that one where it's like, okay, yeah, you could just roll on this random table and it said, oh, there's two ogres in the road on, moving
mm,
from one town to the next. And you could do that. You could just drop two ogres in the road, but wouldn't it be more fun if you
mm.
put a little bit more into it? So you don't find two ogres, you find a cart that's flipped over and everyone's been butchered and all the foodstuffs have been, pulled away. And then your ranger and your druid and your barbarian can
Yeah.
track the bloody footprints through
Right.
the prairie to where the ogres are hiding, right? And then you see the ogres and they've got third-degree burns. And it's like, well, why do they have burns? And it's like, oh, well, you could kill them and you could probably find out, or maybe you can find out some other ways. Oh, there's a dragon that kicked them
Yeah.
out of their cave up the road. So like even that, just roll on a random table and think about it for a minute.
Mm.
Just think,
Yeah.
how would I put this in here?
You're coming up with these organic hooks, right?
Yeah.
If you're thinking backwards from something happened, okay, now
Yep.
what would be the fallout from that? That's
Yep.
what the players see first. That's what the players
Yes.
encounter first, because there's always going to it's every hook is a crime scene, right?
Yeah.
In
Or a
some way.
mystery or
Or
something.
it's just some kind of like,
That's
this is
right.
not things how normally are.
Yeah.
It's no coincidence that the best-selling genre is mysteries.
Yeah.
Even if you're not in fantasy, even if you're writing the good fantasy books will start with some sort of mystery, like what's going on. I
Yes.
mean, all the good books start that way, where something is off, something is wrong, and it's a process of kind of figuring that out. But you're doing everything backwards as a DM. But let's talk
Yep.
about also Meadowlark has a fully fleshed out world,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
you have
Yeah.
been working on. How long have you been
Yep.
working on it?
So we first started developing it, gosh, almost 2 years ago. It would be 2 years into we started working on Asleia, and that was in relation initially to the creation of Fantasy Feast.
Mm,
So, I, as a bladesmith, I was at a restaurant sharpening for one of the nicer restaurants in Indy, and the chef always comes by and chats with me, and I happened to be listening to an actual play, and she came over and said, "Oh, what are you listening to?" And I told her, and she'd never played D&D. She said, "Is that like Elden Ring?" And I was like,
mm,
you can see
well,
some parallels there. You're talking about a fantasy world where there's big monsters and that kind of stuff." And she's like, "Is it like Game of Thrones?" And I was like, "Again, there's a lot of parallels there in that kind of, it depends on how you want to make D&D, but yeah, there's dragons and giants and all that kind of stuff. So if that's the picture that's in your head, Lord of the Rings or um, you know, or gosh, Game of Thrones or whatever,
mm,
you're halfway there. You're halfway there." So I kind of described it to her, and she was like, "Wow, we I wonder if we could make a dinner around that. We're always looking to make themed dinners." And we made a Game of Thrones dinner, and I was like, it just popped in my head, and I was like, "Oh yeah, yeah, we could do that for sure." So that night, I
wow.
text Kevin, and I was like, "Dude, we
Let's
we
do
got
it.
yeah, we got to do this." And he was like, "All right, let's do it." So again, no, it was November. It was in November of almost 2 years ago, because we ended up running it in February. So we just had a couple of months to basically establish the world and write the first adventure. And of course, there's a lot of iterating on that first adventure to make sure that it worked with the concept of Fantasy Feast. That's the key, obviously, is
Mm,
that you got to make that it's multiple courses at a restaurant where each course of food actually kind of rolls back into the specific part of the game that you're in. And so then it's also like, okay, then we actually have to put it in a world. So we have to know about the world, because if the chef wants to do farm to table style local ingredients, we got to tell her what that would be in this world. What would they find in the Selendar Plains before they get to this Ravager war camp? And it's going to be like, okay, yeah. So there would be, ground birds, and there is a river not far from there. So there'd be freshwater mussels and certain kinds of fish. And it's a prairie. So maybe there's not going to be a lot of fungus, but you'd find some. It's a between prairie and savanna. So if there are dead trees, there's going to be fungus growing on those trees. So we could
mm,
probably find some mushrooms, right? So then you have to start thinking through what would exist in this world. If you were to try and find food in a prairie in America, what would you
mm,
find? Right? If you were to try and find food in the savannas of Africa, what would you find? And those are not the same things,
mm,
right? So we had to kind of come up with an analogous thing, and start essentially developing a world so that we could inform our chef partners on what foods they would find here and how to build the menu to work with the adventure.
mm.
Yeah.
If you were going to give some advice to someone who wants to start working on their own world building,
Mhm.
there's so much. It's
Yeah.
overwhelming.
Yeah.
Like, do I
Yeah.
start with the creation myth? Do I just make a map and see where it leads me? Do I come up with a story? There's some anchor point. I think different people are gonna
Yeah.
hook on to one thing and then
Yep.
kind of expand from there. What's your? Would you have any advice if someone was getting into this for the first time?
So I do think it's tough to get very far without having whatever establishing, is this a high magic world? Is this a low magic world? Do gods exist? Right? Start setting the tone for that world first so that you understand how to build
Mm,
what you're going to build. Otherwise, you're building it and then reverse engineering it for the tone that you want to set. So think
mm,
first through, what tone do I want to set with this, right? So if it's like a high magic world and it's and it's fantasy. Okay, so let's just take standard D&D style, and you go, okay, this is creation myth. Number one, you don't have to reinvent the wheel here. You can just say, D&D itself allows for multiversal existence. There's already multiple worlds, and
Mm,
most of them use the same gods. If you just want to use the gods from Earth, that's fine too. Who cares, right? Like, whatever. You can figure that out and figure out how that fits into your world. But I think you just got to figure out what the tone is
mm,
first. Just think through, what kind of world do you want to create? Is this a post-apocalyptic world, right? A
mm,
la Morkborg, where everything is terrible and it sucks, and
mm,
like there's not a lot of bright. Where is this kind of noble bright, where there's heroes and there's good things going on, and that kind of thing. So figure out your tone, and then figure out some history. You don't need to have the whole history. Just figure out, where are the people, right?
mm,
Where are they? And why are they there? Right? And so that is where I think a map helps. If you can sit down and start working out a map, it help to understand, where are people, and why are people here, there, and not there, right?
mm,
Because then that helps you understand where they can go, right? So it's kind of just a step-by-step process, right? Find the tone, develop just enough history so that you know, like, what your players can and can't be in your world, right? Like, if we haven't technologically advanced to the point where there are firearms, then don't allow someone to, be an artificer with a firearm or whatever.
mm,
Just figure out what your limitations are in your world, and then start literally building it, right? Build it, figure out where people are, because that's where culture is, that's where community is, and then ultimately that's where story is, right? Because yes, there are
mm,
monsters and those are going to come and play, but so much of the world is going to be centered around people.
mm,
Again, unless this is an apocalypse and there's just no people left. But for the
mm,
most part, it's going to be centered around people, because we're humans, right? Our best stories are human stories or human analogs,
mm,
right? And so
mm.
once you
And
figure out where the
even
people are,
yeah, I was gonna say even when you're not a human, you're still people,
that's right.
right?
When it's water
Right,
shipped down, it's still
right,
essentially a human story. It's
right.
just rabbit form.
Or if you're all orcs, or
Yeah.
it's like
Yeah, oops, all
you're
halflings.
all still people.
Absolutely. You're still people, right? And so, and you can be evil people. You could be good people. Whatever you want to do there. But like, these are ultimately human stories, right?
Mm,
We are, even if you're an automaton, you
mm,
live in a world that has culture, that has food, that has places where people live. It has all the things that humans have always created. And so, start with that. Like, where are the people? What are they up to? And then start building a map that makes some kind of sense. I mean, you can do random stuff with fantasy maps, but my preference is to at least follow some of the laws of physics that dictate why our planet is the way that it is, right?
mm.
So that we have some understanding of,
Yeah.
like, why would there be a wetland here, or
Mm,
why shouldn't there be? If there's a rain shadow from the mountains, that's how you can get a desert. Or you can get a desert because this waterway closed off and there just isn't
mm.
any rain. It's whether it's mountains or not, there
Yeah, there's
those
just like some magic wall that is preventing weather.
yeah,
There's so many,
yeah, figure that
and now
out.
you've built yeah.
That's right. And now you have a desert. And then you decide, well, do people live there? Did people live there 10,000 years ago? You're right. And if they did, what was it? You're right. Were they more powerful or less powerful or whatever? So, you just kind of start taking one step at a time. Don't try not to get overwhelmed. Try not to go too deep anywhere, but understand that this is meant to be a living world, right?
Mm,
And there's a reason that there are rivers where they are, and there's a reason that mountains are where they are. There's a reason that oceans are where they are. There's a reason that prairies are in Nebraska and Indiana, and that the savanna is in South America and Africa, right? Like, there's a reason for that. So just take a moment to think about what makes sense to have right here. And also, like, you don't have to go huge right off the bat. right?
Mm.
You can build a pretty small and narrow space when you're first starting an adventure, because like they're not going to get very far very fast. You could build the town that they're in, and a certain distance of surrounding area, and then just tell the players like, you've all grown up in this area.
Mm.
Everything outside of that we'll figure out as we
Right. You
go.
could go deep rather than wide. You can
You
say you can
can.
spend a lot of time and figure out all the different people and all the just in one neighborhood. I mean, if you've
Yeah.
been to a big city, like if you've been to New York, just Brooklyn is a is
Yeah.
just Brooklyn is enough to find adventure of a
Yeah.
lifetime. Like,
Yeah. Just think
it's like
about, like, and you can look at other media. Think about how many mafia movies just
mm,
take place in one neighborhood,
right,
right? Or even like, crime movies, gang crime
right.
movies or whatever. They take place in one neighborhood. All these people, all
All the whole
these
time.
lives, all this stuff never leaves like a 10-block radius,
Right.
right?
World
Again,
doesn't necessarily mean planet.
yeah,
It
now.
means the web of connections of all the people and how they're relating to each other.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, you can go deep. You can just narrow your focus to one little area, because they're not getting out of there real quick. They
Mm,
really aren't, right? And you can, I mean, hell, you can have a whole campaign in one city if your players really want to do that. You
mm,
don't have to go traipsing off into the hinterlands. You can stay in one spot if you got enough things to do.
mm,
But yeah, just find something that you can anchor your players to, and
mm,
then you can start building out from there. You don't have to have the whole thing written and developed, and don't be afraid. Like, Kevin and I do a ton of iterating in our creative process, and just a ton of it, where we say, all right, this is the tone we want. How do we get there? Right? You say, well, what if it's like this? And we go, oh, okay, yeah. Well, what if it's like that though? Okay. We pick which what if feels like the better one. And sometimes you'll go a good way down the path and you go, you know what? We got to come back to this what if, and then go that different direction, because that's going to work better
mm,
for what we're trying to put into this world, right? Like, um don't be afraid to back out. What if something doesn't look or feel quite the way you want, just come back out of it and come back
mm,
in at a different angle, and reiterate and think about, why is that there, or why, again, it's kind of like, again, the five whys. We've talked about that too,
mm,
right? Like, why is that there? And you get your answer and you go, well, why is that the answer? And you get that answer and you go, well, why is that the answer? And you just kind of dig into it until you find something that's satisfying, and you go, that's
mm,
it, we got it. That's why that's there now, and now we can build something around it.
mm.
But at least you've got some answers, but yeah, at any time, just be like, that's not going to work. We're going to put something else there.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that. It's your world. Who cares? you
That's
know,
great.
the players are just happy to be there. Like, who
Right.
cares?
That's right.
Don't kill yourself over this stuff. Just have
Yeah.
fun. Again,
Yeah.
you're supposed to be having fun. So if you're
Yeah.
stressed, like, to the gills about what you're putting in this world, you're not having fun,
Mm,
and you should consider. No, and then number one, like, or number two, and we kind of hinted at this earlier. There's nothing wrong with you reaching out to your players and saying, "Hey, help me develop this part of the world that you're from."
mm,
Right? They can know that there's a city there. Who cares? It doesn't have to be you. The DM is the only one that knows that city's there. They can know that city's there. I know that New York City is in New York City. Like, whether you know that or not, I know that it's there, and
mm,
that's fine. You can do that too. Your players can do that too. They can
mm,
help you build this world. They can help with, everyone can help with, what's the flora, what's the fauna, what are the big trees that are here, if there's no trees, what's the scary things in the oceans. They can help develop that stuff, right? It's not all metagaming. Some of this
mm,
is like this, again, this is the world that these characters live in. They
mm,
will have heard of some of it, maybe not all of it, but they will have heard of some of it, you know, especially if you're an adult and you're even half curious. You'll
right.
have heard of most of the things in the world by the time you're, old enough in age. If you're an 800-year-old elf, you're telling me they don't know what a, specific monster is? They probably do. Unless it's
Probably
an
do.
aberration from another plane of existence, they probably know about that. Just let them tell it, let them make it up. It's
Right.
fine. Just bring your players into it too. They can help.
Mm.
They're not
S-
passengers here.
So, I think we're close on time.
Yeah, I'm
Before we
good.
go, um, what? Uh, hold on a second. How do I want to say this? How do you want people to find you?
Yeah, so we do have a website, meadowlarkgames.com, and that's where we post events and things like that. But for the most part, you can just come find us on social media. We have TikTok and Instagram, a YouTube that's mostly just full of shorts because we haven't fully set up our long form content yet.
Yeah.
There is more to come. We're working on uh, a kind of a horror adventure right now that we would like to at least have a PDF of later on this year. Would love to have it ready by Halloween. I just don't know that we will. Art is sometimes the hardest thing to get in place,
Right.
but we'll have that kind of stuff up on our website. We'll probably ultimately have a Discord when we're ready for people to play test it and all that kind of stuff. But right now, just check us out on social media. TikTok, Instagram, YouTube,
Yeah. We'll put
and
all
then we
the
do.
we'll put all the links here
Yeah,
too.
yeah, sounds good.
So.
Sounds good. Yeah, that's probably the best place to find us. We try to post every day, thoughts to questions, ideas that pop in our head, things that we're working on, all that kind of stuff. We try to stay active. We try to answer everybody's questions. Anybody has them, that kind of stuff.
All right, Eric, thank you so much for making the time and talking to
Thank
us.
you
And
so much for having
I'm
me.
sure when you'd like to come back, if you want to talk about other systems, or if you
Oh
want to
yeah,
talk about some world development that you've got, or
love to
just
anytime.
food, if you want to talk about blades, I want to
Yeah,
talk about blades.
yeah, yeah.
You're always welcome back.
I would love to come back, and then once we have ours set up, we'll definitely have you on as well, for
Awesome,
sure.
thank you. Oh, that's great. Thank you. All
Yeah,
right,
thank
have a
you.
great day. See you.
Thanks, you too.